Hello and welcome to the cellar. This is the last video of the repointing in the old cellar, so I'm really happy about that. It's been 1300 days of repointing, about 3.5 years. Really happy it's done, and I'll be able to move on other aspects of transforming this cellar into a workshop. This video is quite late, it's because of this guy. I think I'll stop there. I have a bit of a sore leg, so I shouldn't really be walking, but It turns out I needed some real time to heal my leg. Also, I tweaked my back in the middle, so more time for healing. But I'm alright now, and I managed to finish this last wall. As you've seen, this video is quite long. Since this is the last video of the repointing process, I wanted to record it in a bit more details than my previous video, which used a lot of time lapses. Also, I tried to make some better pictures. I took the time out of the repointing work. I hope to have a bit more cinematic feel for this last repointing episode. At the end of the video, as a reward for watching it, there are some nice befores and afters, which also I forgot to do in the previous ones. It's a silent video, no music, and I'll have some comments in the subtitles. So thank you for watching this video, and I will see you pretty soon in the next ones.